Serious, what is the most terrifying true crime case that you've heard or read about? Watched one recently on Lori Vallow. She and her affair partner, Chad Daybell, both killed their spouses, married soon after, and killed her 2 children and buried them on their property. One was dismembered and burned, and the other was found in his pajamas wrapped in plastic and duct-taped. They had a list of friends and family members ranked as light and dark spirits for zombies, and were on a mission to kill them all. I think I found it so disturbing because they used their religion to justify killing anyone that pissed them off. She literally cut up and burned her daughter because she was being a difficult teenager. It was kind of unreal to listen to her grown son call her, in prison, and try to get some sort of admission or apology out of her. She was just like, you wouldn't understand, like she was doing something meaningful. Zero remorse. Like I would never want to feel sorry for someone so disgusting and depraved, but at the same time, she sounded completely brainwashed, like she had lost her damn mind. Saying her husband was possessed by a demon, and she was a god and shit. And I felt so bad for her husband, because he tried to warn everyone she was crazy, and get the cops to help and to protect his kids too, but everyone ignored him, and most of her family members wouldn't speak to him. He died with barely anyone fighting to help him. On Netflix, Sins of Our Mother. This happened a city over from where I live. A woman was convicted of cutting an unborn baby from its mother's womb. The attacker was a former nurse, and posted an ad to sell baby clothes. The 7th-month pregnant woman who answered the online ad was beat and stabbed, and the attacker cut into her uterus and removed the fetus. The whole reason for this attack was that the ex-nurse had been going along with a ruse saying she was pregnant, and her partner believed her. So after the attack, the ex-nurse's partner came home to take her to a doctor's appointment, and saw she was covered in blood. She claimed she miscarried, while the stabbed victim was unknowingly in the couple's basement. Not knowing the victim was in the basement, the partner took the attacker and the baby to the hospital, where I believe the baby died. The victim, who was cut open, was able to call 911 and survived the attack. Even after all of this trauma, the nurse tried to claim that the 7th-month pregnant woman attacked her first, so she fought back in self-defense, was worried she hurt her, and then cut the baby out of the mother to try to save it. It was a super shocking story in that city. I believe the attacker was sentenced to 100 or so years in prison. Junko Furuta. Also by far the most heartbreaking I've ever heard of. I'm not queasy, but reading those details about her case is just beyond horrific. If I could go back in time and save any human being, it wouldn't be my cousin who died in a car crash. It would be Junko. She was such a brave and strong girl, and no one deserves to suffer like she did. There's a description of starving Russian prisoners during World War II that's haunted me. And that, frankly, made the descriptions from Dante or from the Donner Party seem like junior varsity cannibalism. It's one thing to wait until another person dies when someone is starving, or to even have their permission before they die. But suppose people are so desperate they single out one live individual and set upon the victim as a pack, without weapons. Not sure whether the reports are to be trusted. But reportedly they took out the eyes first, then the arms. During World War II, the American military found out that a large majority of men would fire over the heads of the enemy. They didn't want to kill people. They did a study, and found what made good killer. They told women to not hold babies, it was making them sissy men. This was the standard advice for women in the 40s and 50s. A researcher named Harry Harlow thought this was crazy. He raised monkeys that were isolated from their moms. The isolated monkeys grew up to be seriously maladapted. The monkeys could not function socially. They were violent and sexually estranged. These monkeys had violent sex, and often kill female monkeys. Female monkeys hated sex. When forced to reproduce, they often killed and ate their babies. These experiments only did what women were told to do with their children. 20 years after this horrible parental advice, there was a spike in serial murders in America. This spike started in the 60s and lasted to the 80s. They don't teach you that in school. The murder of 5-year-old Jason Foreman. That one creeps me out. Michael Woodmansey was 16 when he kidnapped and murdered Jason, and when they finally searched Michael's room, I believe he was a cop's son, So the first time they came to his house, they dismissed him because of that. They found bones that were picked clean and shellacked in a journal of the details of what he did to the poor little boy. They wouldn't release the details from the journal because they were too gruesome. Jeffrey Dahmer inviting guys to his grandma's place, drugging and killing them, then having sex with their bodies. Which wasn't enough, so he used to dissect them, get rid of what he didn't want, but keep the rest preserved for pleasure. Sometimes he would talk to these parts while ripping a guy he just killed with a chainsaw. He was also so obsessive with control that at one point he believed he could turn one of his victims into a zombie sex doll he could use without having to worry about it eventually rotting, which he did try by drilling a hole in the guy's head and injecting it with HCI. What he didn't expect, though, is that later that day, after going out to get some beer, he would return to the guy barely conscious by the house, with a couple of women suspicious of what's going on that he tried to convince he was his boyfriend, but they still called the police, who quickly shut them up after a convincing story from Dahmer. Later, when he was finally caught after one of the guys he lured managed to get away with his life, the police found human fillet in the fridge, which he'd been eating, and skulls 11 if I remember correctly. Some of them were painted, some still had flesh on. Dude, so many. First, Ken and Barbie killers, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, killed 3 young girls. Carla tried to say it was all Paul, but they made videos. Jeffrey Dahmer. The Bender family from 1870s. They killed travelers for their money and were never caught. Rumors say the daughter made her way to California before she died around 90. Manson family. Elizabeth Bathory, bathed in blood of young women because she thought it kept her young, wasn't even arrested, but put on house arrest. She died and no one noticed for a while. Jack the Ripper. H.H. Holmes, rumored to be the Ripper, but made a hotel in Chicago and processed to kill everyone and wives and had torture rooms and a furnace the size of a human. He even told the person installing it, make it big enough for a person. Samuel Little, killed 100 prostitutes, remembers all their faces, but there's about 50 or so with our identifiers. He made oil pastels of each victim. I was unwillingly exposed to the footage recorded by the Dnipro Maniacs. Some people may know this as 3 Guys 1 Hammer. I know the OP prompt was heard or read about, but I did indeed hear, and see, to some extent, early blurrycam cell phone video, a man get brutally murdered, albeit not in real time. It took a long time to not be constantly sick about it. Long time. I never sought out violent content before that, and I sure as shit don't now. The only positive thing about the whole experience is that the person who forced me to watch it went to jail for unrelated reasons. I don't sleep well. This happened in my country, and I think one of the most gruesome of our decade. Basically, the husband pretended that burglars entered their house and killed his wife and their dog. In reality, he murdered his wife and placed their baby daughter next to her body. He also killed the dog for barking at him and trying to attack him. He then tied himself and called police pretending that this all happened by burglars. All of Greece was shocked after months that the truth came out. Guy was even talking to the TV with no problem. Apparently the cat they were feeding with his wife showed signs of fear and run away when he approached them. Now that's an animal instinct. Anyway, I always want to vomit about how not only he killed her, but even put the baby next to his wife's dead body. Peggy Reber from Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I used to live down the road from where this happened. She was like 14 and was found in her room strangled with a belt by an unknown perpetrator, and sodomized and assaulted by multiple objects, including a fiberglass bow that was repeatedly inserted so far it punctured internal organs, and was left protruding just under her skin in the chest area. There are so many things that went wrong when investigating the case. All the neighbors and officers walked all over the crime scene and tampered with so much evidence. Some believe it was a town cover-up, or that murderer was or knew the police. Her mother was a known sex worker, and PPL in town treated them like crap. Detectives were fired for trying to dig up and solve the case. It's still unsolved. Was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about this guy in Biloxi that kept getting creepy calls via his landline at work. Got called every few minutes, some kind of menace or weirdo on the phone, I guess. So every time the guy picked up his office line, the person on the other line would say, "I'm the Viper. I'm on X floor." The office guy was working on the 8th floor. He just kept hanging up, but the Viper kept calling. "I'm on the 3rd floor. I'm on the 5th floor," etc. "It's the Viper. I'm stepping off the elevator. It's the Viper, I'm walking down the hall. It's the Viper, I'm about to be at your door. Sure enough, the Viper was at his office door. Knock, knock, knock. So the office guy throws the door open to confront this guy, and standing in front of him is a tiny European man, all of 5 foot tall, holding a squeegee and a bucket of water, and the tiny man says, "I'm the Viper, the window Viper, and LVE come to wash your windows." Fernando Hernandez Leva. He was a serial killer in Mexico. He was charged with 33 counts of murder, but he confesses to over 100 murders. It is thought that he killed 132-ish in total based off of his confessions and the ones he was caught with. However, he wasn't charged for any murders that didn't have evidence tying him to them. This guy grew up being bested and molested by his family. As an adult, he had a hard time dating women or doing anything with women. So he began taking out his aggression on little boys. Trigger warning AAAAA. He would rape and mutilate little boys from 3 to 16. His main fascination had to do with the little boys' butts. Cutting them, slicing them, stabbing them, even shoving things into it like a screwdriver. This is the stuff he confessed to and explained it all with joy. I have studied many past cases for forensic classes, but this one was the worst one I ever heard of. The details only get worse, but that's all I feel most of y'all are ready to know. Sex trafficking of children and young women onto boats where there is no jurisdiction. Their lives are spent being drugged, physically and mentally tortured and abused, with literally nobody to help them. A terrifying thought. Happens more often than you might think. And when I say tortured, I don't just mean rape and sex without consent over and over and over again, which is horrific, mean actual physical torture involving incredible physical and mental pain over and over and over. The thing that horrifies me the most is that people pay money to do this to others and actually get off on it. I cannot even fathom what goes on in a person's mind that they could continuously do this to others. Sex trafficking of children and young women onto boats where there is no jurisdiction. Their lives are spent being drugged, physically and mentally tortured and abused, with literally nobody to help them. A terrifying thought. Happens more often than you might think. And when I say tortured, I don't just mean rape and sex without consent over and over and over again, which is horrific, mean actual physical torture involving incredible physical and mental pain over and over and over. The thing that horrifies me the most is that people pay money to do this to others and actually get off on it. I cannot even fathom what goes on in a person's mind that they could continuously do this to others. Sex trafficking of children and young women onto boats where there is no jurisdiction. Their lives are spent being drugged, physically and mentally tortured and abused, with literally nobody to help them. A terrifying thought. Happens more often than you might think. And when I say tortured, I don't just mean rape and sex without consent over and over and over again, which is horrific, mean actual physical torture involving incredible physical and mental pain over and over and over. The thing that horrifies me the most is that people pay money to do this to others and actually get off on it. I cannot even fathom what goes on in a person's mind that they could continuously do this to others. Sex trafficking of children and young women onto boats where there is no jurisdiction. Their lives are spent being drugged, physically and mentally tortured and abused, with literally nobody to help them. A terrifying thought. Happens more often than you might think. And when I say tortured, I don't just mean rape and sex without consent over and over and over again, which is horrific, mean actual physical torture involving incredible physical and mental pain over and over and over. The thing that horrifies me the most is that people pay money to do this to others and actually get off on it. I cannot even fathom what goes on in a person's mind that they could continuously do this to others.
One heard one where guy deceived disabled woman that he loved her and literally took her and small baby to his house, starved them to death. She tried to escape, but all one farmer heard was somebody's cries. I can't remember where it was. It was from 1970 somewhere. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to see more videos like this.